So many books, so little time, so little space, so little money. But many fans love to collect physical copies of their favorite stories, often so much that they run out of bookshelf space. Zach and myself are in this very situation right now. Now that we have audiobook and digital copies of stories, isn't book collection a waste of resources?
Speculative fiction, like no other genre, reflects the creativity of God.
If you look at the scriptures, you're going to have to see that God uses imagination more than rational discourse.
We are supposed to be image bearers for a vastly creative God.
Reading fantastical fiction opened a portal in my imagination for a place other than just a materialistic world.
I experienced the gospel story with the mind of someone who loved adventure and loved the idea of light conquering darkness.
We're wired for stories that reflect how we see the world in ways that are true.
The story is either pointing to Christ or it's pointing to our need for Christ.
Welcome to our library at Fantastical Truth, the Lorehaven podcast, whose mission is to help fans and families explore fantastical stories for God's glory. I'm Stephen Burnett. I publish Lorehaven. I am awaiting my Heavenly Mansion library in the New Heavens and New Earth, and I wrote a sci-fi novel released earlier this year from Enclave Publishing called Above the Circle of Earth.
And I'm Zackary Russell, and I just clawed my way out of my TBR pile that fell over on top of me while I slept last night. And this is episode 277. Isn't physical book collection a waste of resources?
That'll be the books. Zach, you'll want to buy your new bookshelves quickly if they're coming from anywhere outside the United States, because I just saw that a certain president said he's going to tariff furniture that is not made in the USA within 90 days or so. Wow. I literally have IKEA shelves in my shopping cart right now that I need to just go ahead and purchase before they all get tariffed or something. We're going to avoid the politics here, folks.
Yeah, and you have to wonder if that whole thing is an IKEA viral marketing campaign, because that's, genius.
It just could be. You know, folks, I would love to get bookshelves made in the United States if they're readily available and easily assemblable, if that's a word. But right now, I would just love to get any kind of bookshelves because I now have books spilling out on the floor. Part of that is my fault. I have what I call jokingly shrines to particular fandoms on my shelves that could be used for books, but it's kind of nice to add that seasoning of visual stories as well as the print-worthy stories.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm looking at the door to my study here and thinking, wow, what a boring door. Why not make that a hidden bookshelf door, which is I
think
been in my shopping cart at Home Depot for a few years now, and I've got a carpenter friend who really wants to come build it for me, but hopefully I can save up a little bit more money this year and make that happen.
That would be marvelous. I think, though, there's a name. There's like a specific manufacturer who makes those.
Oh, Murphy Door.
Actually have to. That's the one, the Murphy Doors. That's right. Yep. We're giving all kinds of free shout outs here at the top of this episode.
Not sponsored by
Home
Depot.
You have to reinforce the door frame or something. And at the same time, I do wonder, that must be kind of rough on the carpet or the floor because you got to add like a reinforced wheel down there or something. But okay, so we're dreaming here about New Earth bookshelves, Old Earth bookshelves, either way, physical bookshelves to hold all of those books that we just keep collecting and even reading. That's the theme of this episode, more about the general discipline of reading, not so much about the fantastical, but I'd say that almost all of our books, Zach's and mine, are fantastical or fantastical adjacent, and therefore it fits because Lorehaven's mission is to get you those best Christian-made fantastical novels. That's why we do weekly reviews, such as our recent review for J.J. Fisher's new fantasy, Heart of the King. Just released, I think, just the week before the review, or maybe it releases today. I'd have to go check. But our next review is from S.D. Grimm, Sarah Grimm from Enclave Publishing. It's a novel coming out called Beneath False Stars, and Lord willing, we will have that review this Friday. If you want to keep up with all the great stuff Lorehaven is doing at our mission, you subscribe free at lorehaven.com. We will send you updates and also the secret code to join the Lorehaven Guild, where you can partake in monthly book quests, curated stuff. We're near, I forget exactly what the number of heroes is right now, but we got hundreds of people in there. The place is hopping even more so. We'd love to have you join us. Well, we don't just read books, we also listen to stories, such as our next sponsor, 1232, an exciting binge-worthy audio epic presented by our friends at Oasis Family Media. This comes from creators Callie Sue and Cheyenne Landry of, gonna roll the R again, Rumble Stump Entertainment, a faith in action audio adventure for all ages. 1232. When the experimental research of a physicist goes awry, his estranged twin children follow him through time to medieval Wales in the year 1232 AD, where they come face to face with a brutal world filled with superstition and legends. Along the way, they meet a penniless leader, a dark sorceress, and a warrior priest who provoke the twins into confronting the truth about themselves, each other, and Jesus Christ. Season 1 of 1232 is now available wherever you get your podcasts or audiobooks. Start listening today to 1232 and visit audio-epic.com to begin the adventure. That is audio-epic.com. All the links and the cool art in our episode notes for this one, 277. Well, Zach, that one is free, and so are the concessions. You got a little concession stand here before we move on to chapter 1. You're bringing it in today.
Yeah, so this is kind of more of like our preamble and our overview of why are we talking about this. Obviously, we're, I guess you got to say part of this is like we're wondering, how did we get all these books, and why did we think this was a good idea, and is it still a good idea? Because I'm not quite kidding when I say books are toppling over on top of me. So I've got a built-in bookshelf here, and then I've got books on top of those, and then I've got books stacked in front of those, and so my poor wife, I'm always threatening her with building more bookshelves in the house. And meanwhile, thinking about that parable that Jesus told about the rich man who tore down his barn to build a bigger barn. And then God says, "You fool, tonight your life will be
full of
asked
books
of you."
that you cannot eat.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Well, that's why I mentioned my New Earth reference at the front. Is I
Right.
believe that that's an overrealized eschatology to have the giant Beauty and the Beast castle library with that rotating staircase. And it's even better, by the way, if you can have that staircase go out 3 flights and then rotate not just side by side, but if you get one that actually is on a curving track.
Ooh,
Now
wow.
that is an
That's
overrealized eschatology.
Yeah.
That's New Earth stuff. Absolutely.
Right. So there's all kinds of things, all kinds of aesthetics, and I just wish I could read everything I have. I mean, I joke that my book collection is my retirement plan, because it's going to take until I retire to read it all, or until I have time to read it all. But what we're actually talking about today is why broadly in our culture, and we'll get into some statistics and stories, but why our culture broadly is rejecting the entire idea of reading a book, not just having a book collection, but reading a whole book, and not just reading the Cliff Notes or the AI summary. And we are talking here about culture in general. Now, you may come from a Christian family, dear listener. You may come from a homeschool family where such an idea is foreign to you, that people would not read a book. I can already hear my middle teenage daughter just gasping for air that people would not want to read a whole book, much less mini books. So that may not be your culture, dear listener, but this is definitely a trend in the wider culture. Now, we are also noticing a trend of young male readers being very turned off by modern publishing. They are not afraid to just DNF, did not finish a book, and chuck it across the room, never think about it again, sell it to half-price books, throw it away, whatever. They do not care about not finishing a book, and not caring about being a reader in general, or being known as being a reader. There's also the problem of screen addiction, which we'll definitely talk about. Now, these particular issues, young male readers being turned off from reading, the problems of technology and how it interferes with reading, these are going to be drawn from, and we'll put these in the show notes. There was an article in The Atlantic that talked about just why Gen Z came to see books as a waste of time. And then there was an interview with Indy Wilson called Why the Boys Aren't Reading. A fascinating inside look with Wilson into the publishing industry. He's been published author for about 20 years. He told a really compelling story about, he had this book written, ready to go for 12-year-old boys, which is that really hard to crack market. And a publisher said, well, what if you basically change the whole content of this so that it appeals to moms? And he's like, yeah, that's a totally different audience. And they don't seem to have a problem finding books that they like. But 12-year-old boys definitely do have a problem finding those books. So gonna stick with that. You multiply that conversation by 1,000 or 10,000, and you can understand why a lot of boys aren't reading books. Because they either the books that are designed for them aren't getting published or they're getting changed. And meanwhile, they're told, what's wrong with you? You know, why aren't you reading all these books that we didn't really make for you, but we thought we were? So if you want to get into that issue more, definitely go check out Wilson's interview. Or if you want to hear how at the college level, the professors are finding that they can't assign a book in college to students. They won't even read a whole thing. They'll read parts of it. In one professor's case, he said people won't even read a whole sonnet in one of his classes. So the Atlantic really covers that well with some honestly scary stories and some statistics. So we are going to talk kind of about the broader trend. And I think the deeper belief, I think there's an internal cause why people don't want to read or have a physical book on the bookshelf, much less a collection of them.
Zach, did you say the cause? Because I don't like those guys too much. If you haven't heard, well, there's kind of two main issues here. And the first one is probably a topic for a future episode, maybe even a near future episode about cultivating a lifestyle of reading, whether that includes physical books, digital books, or audiobooks. It is all reading all the same. We don't diss any of those media. But there's just something about physical books, and I'm sure there's a lot of memes that will extol the various virtues of these print copies, backs of dead trees, and all of that. I think there's a few reasons that people may not be as apt, even if they do like reading. They may be more focused on digital books, ebooks that is, or audiobooks. And that's simply a lot of the reasons that we'll talk about in these next chapters. But a brief forecast of our next episode, or whatever episode we talk about cultivating reading. There was actually a very recent New York Times article posted August 20th of this year by Maggie Astor titled, "Fewer People Are Reading for Fun, Study Finds." And this is the start of that article. Any reader knows the unique delight of settling down with a good book. But over the past 2 decades, there has been a steady decline in Americans who read for fun, according to a study published on Wednesday. Researchers from University College London and the University of Florida examined national data from 2003 to 2023 and found that the share of people who reported reading for pleasure on a given day fell to 16% in 2023 from a peak of 28% in 2004, a drop of about 40%, and over these 2 decades it declined around 3% each year. There is evidence that reading for pleasure has been declining since the 1940s, the researchers said, but they called the size of the latest decrease surprising, given that the study defined reading broadly, encompassing books, magazines, and newspapers in print, electronic, or audio form. So even if you expand that definition, this is me talking now, as broadly as possible, people are not reading altogether. But I think even those, Zach, who are reading will be wondering, well, it's just easier for me to carry my electronic device or my phone aboard the plane, and books are heavy. And maybe I'm moving a lot or don't have the space for a lot of bookshelves and a lot of print copies of books. Maybe it's just better to stick with the electronic and audio. So we're making an apologetic in this episode. Hey, there's just something about print books. It is worth the money, worth the time, worth the space. Let's proceed now into chapter 1, why a physical book collection isn't a waste of money. Zach, over to you.
Yeah, so I think this is where a lot of people start. They start by thinking, oh, well, to have a book, I've got to first purchase it. So that's money out of my wallet, out of my paycheck, out of my savings, whatever. And I think, the really cynical attitude is like the Judas Iscariot. Well, these books could have been sold and the money given to the poor. Like I can imagine Judas walking into my library saying, you have something like 600 books on this bookshelf. Man, think of how many poor people you could have fed with this. How many good things you could have done instead of buy these books. I'm obviously ragging on the villain in the story, Judas Iscariot, but I think that attitude is somewhere in all of our souls as Christians. We feel a little guilty about spending money on books. We think, oh man, there's so many other things I could invest in and donate my money to. I think that mindset is back there. In each of these chapters, I want to start off by sort of steel manning, like, where do these ideas come from, and then address them, okay? reading a book is also work. It takes more work to sit there and flip pages and imagine what's happening rather than just watching a movie where someone else imagined it for you and visualized it and brought the sound to life. And maybe you're even one of those 4D theaters that has smells and, and other things. I don't think I'd ever want to go into one of those, but people like them. Or just enjoying some other form of entertainment. People have high expectations for a book. I would almost say higher. Someone recently was kind of breaking down this was when the Nintendo Switch 2 came out. The price was higher, the price of games were higher, but then people started adding up, well, how many hours do you actually play a Nintendo game? And boy, it's, 50, 80 hours or something for a game. And that's about the range of video game prices. So you're talking about $1 per hour. That's not a bad deal. But, books are about that same rate, maybe, depending on the if it's on sale or if it's a doorstopper type book. But still, it's like you're doing the math of like, okay, this is going to entertain me for how many hours at what cost. So many books nowadays have disappointed readers, or they've browbeat them or lectured them. And so a lot of people are, especially young readers, they're really skeptical and they're wondering, is this next book going to be worth my money? There's a really good quote, Stephen, I think this was from Stephen King in his memoir On Writing, but every AI bot and web search says this quote belongs to Jerry Purnell. Maybe Jerry was quoted in King's book, but he says, quote, "We're basically after Joe's beer money, and Joe likes his beer, so you better make sure that what you give him is at least as pleasurable to him as having his 6-pack of beer would be," end quote.
That's a good quote. It reminds me of a series of memes done by some struggling authors a few years ago. Fortunately, I see few of them repeated now, where they're basically whining and complaining that people would spend their money on coffee rather than spending money on their book. And I think, well, then you need to make sure that the book is as pleasurable an experience as the coffee from a known and trusted brand that they always know is going to do what they expect. And frankly, complaining about people not reading your book doesn't necessarily give off that "I'm here to make you happy" vibe.
I think you're exactly right that a lot of authors act entitled to someone's attention and their money. And readers pick up on that because they can read what authors say on social media. And so again, there's kind of that turnoff, and we've seen this with so many movies, with so many franchises where fans don't like it, and then they are problematized. Well, you didn't like this because you are a bad person in this category. And so readers or potential readers, they don't like being treated that way either. They want to know that they are valued and that their time is valued. So let's flip this around. Like, how do we answer this objection that physical books are a waste of money? Well, truth is, you can always make more money. Okay, and I know that sounds easy, and let's not get into the Dave Ramsey
thing. Do you want to make more money? Of course, we all do. That's right, for you old listeners out there.
Yeah. But, maybe you need to get on the rice and beans diet so you can have more books, or buy that jalopy instead of that new Mercedes, or what does Dave Ramsey call it? Get a beater, instead of a nice car. But yeah, seriously, you can make more money, but also you can make a budget. You can put books as a line item in your budget. And again, I know Naomi's listening going, well, where are we on our book budget? Have you already spent all your book budget? But there's also the library, which is a great way to try out a book that you're like, I'm not so sure about this. I mean, again, my middle daughter, we're going to the library this weekend because she checked out a bunch of books. She's like, I just want to return all those and get new ones. She doesn't feel guilty at all about that because, hey, we didn't spend the money on it. Someone else did. And so that's a good way to address that. But let's talk about why books are actually a good investment. So here's kind of the big idea. Every job out there requires communication and people skills. And yes, if you're a fan of Office Space, where there was the guy trying to justify his job to the consultants that are there to make a bunch of layoffs, he's like, I have people skills. And he's yelling at them. People skills, very valuable. And here's my big idea. This is a skill best learned through a novel, some kind of fiction where you see fictional portrayals of people interacting, and you get to go along on a journey with people navigating very difficult circumstances and at no risk to yourself. You get to see people make a ton of mistakes, and you get to learn from them without any of the pain or the consequences. That's why Proverbs exists. Not only all these life lessons, but some stories, but it's so that you don't have to make all the same mistakes as other people. And there's this quote from the Atlantic article. It says, according to the neuroscientist Marianne Wolf, so-called deep reading, which is sustained immersion in a text, stimulates a number of valuable mental habits, including critical thinking and self-reflection, in ways that skimming or reading in short bursts does not. Now, why am I talking about this? Well, along with this trend of people not reading is this whole other trend of people using ChatGPT and other kinds of AI to just summarize a book for them and then giving themselves a fake merit badge. Oh, I read this book. Now, this is not a new thing. I'll just say there's nothing new under the sun. I remember the days of Cliff's Notes, and I probably used 1 or 2 or 5 in high school to get out of reading a book I didn't want to read. I still remember being amazed that I could write an entirely fake essay in high school English class, and I won't say which teacher or which book, but I did not read it. I did my best to guess what the book was about, and I actually got a pretty good grade on that essay. But it wasn't as funny as my friend Matthew that literally just drew a picture of the cover for his high school English essay, showing that he didn't even open the book and know anything about it. So yeah, this is nothing new. It's just a new tool that people are using to say that they read a book. Now, why are they doing this? Okay, so this is the really interesting thing to me, Stephen. In these articles that we've posted, the Atlantic, New York Times, the trend that's coming out is that college students in particular are thinking to themselves, I got to make a lot of money after college. College is expensive. Housing is expensive. Eggs are expensive. I don't have time to play around. I've got to get the job skills and all the life skills I need right now so that I can get an awesome job right out of college. Now, nothing wrong with that impulse necessarily, but I think it's short-term versus long-term thinking. The desire for those skills, the desire for those abilities is a good thing. Books are a really easy way to get some of those skills. Because as I said, you get to go on a journey where you don't pay any price, and you get to learn from the heroism or the cowardice or the villainy or just the life lessons from other people, and then that becomes a part of you.
So why then spend money on physical books? I could do all of those things theoretically just through audiobooks or digital books, so long as I'm reading the whole thing and practicing my reading skills. Why should I pay money on a $25, $30 book that takes up space and is a lot of, that's a lot of money. Why should I? Well, here's why. First, the neat part is you don't. You don't necessarily have to pay $25 for a new book. Now, right now, my new book costs about that much, although sometimes even big old Amazon will put it on some crazy sale like they did just recently for Above the Circle of Earth and a lot of Enclave titles. So you can certainly look for books, right or wrong. These giant retailers like Amazon will often cut the rates on these. They will buy them in bulk and pay less and then pass along the savings to you. So you can certainly do that. You can, of course, also get books for free at the library, physical books. Now, you don't keep those, but that means that you get to enjoy the benefits, the deeply human benefits of a tangible physical copy of the book. That new book smell or that old book smell, whatever book smell, these senses do something as well to you as a person. They are stimulating the imagination in a way that a digital or audiobook can't. I think you're also participating in a greater story. Humans who have been reading books and before that parchments and all these different media for millennia. And now you are joining that tradition in the year of our Lord 2020, whatever it is. You now also are reading. That connects you, I think, to the human experience in a way that an audio or digital book can't, although those things do have advantages. Another reason to buy specifically even expensive new books is if they're good new books. And that's kind of the caveat for what, Zach, you were saying earlier about, practicing your human skills by going along journey with humans. If they're well written, if they're actually capturing the human experience and not just some parody of it or some cheapened version of fake reality, if they're good books, these are literally making you a better person. You are being made a better person through enjoying these stories, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, whether it's fantasy or contemporary or history or whatever. If they're good, with the kind of truth, beauty, and goodness we talked about in our last episode, 276, then God personally is working through those books, not like the Bible, but through common grace, through the transmission of good virtues in these stories. And literally, when you are becoming a better person, the chances increase, by the way, that you are going to make more money anyway. So it's not just a matter of saying, well, books matter, so get a job. Books are going to help you, I think, get better jobs because you're becoming a better person. And then certainly, even apart from those humanist considerations, physical books are connecting you with the more personal experience of a Christian. The Bible was transmitted with tangible media, scrolls originally, writing on skins even before that. But now, like we talked about in our last episode, physical books mattered so much to Christ's people, even going back to antiquity, that we had a whole new technology, Gutenberg's printing press, invented just so we could make physical books. I think that's where that matters. They have a place in history, and they certainly have a place in God's eternity.
Yeah, and you ask a great question there, Stephen. Why pay for not just digital book or an audio book, which, I've got hundreds of those as well. Why pay for a physical book? Here's a really simple reason why. You can't lend a digital book. I mean, have you ever tried it? Amazon does not make this very simple.
So technically, Amazon's lending the digital book to you anyway.
Right. Well, very true now. And only some books can be lent out. There's a limit to how many times you can do this. I've done this like once or twice because it's so complicated. But you can easily lend, or really, better yet, give a physical book. Now, there's some Star Trek episode, I don't remember which one, where he says, I think it's Picard, says, never lend a book, just give it. And I've always thought about that, 30 years later. I do use an app called Book Buddy, where I keep track of, you just like scan the barcode on your book and then you can categorize it. And then there's even a function to loan that book to someone, and you can keep track of who you gave which book. And this is a huge part of building community, not just the app, but lending books. This is an investment, with an invaluable ROI, okay? Because every time you lend a book to someone, you forge a bond with them that's going to last. I still remember books that people loaned me in high school, or that I loaned others in college, and that we talked about. And I can think back to those conversations 20, 30 years later. I can think back to recent conversations I've had with books I've shuffled around with friends, books that people loaned me and that I gave back or we talked about. These kinds of relationships, there's no price tag you can put on that. And having those connections, I mean, those will definitely help you in the professional world. So if you're going into the business world soon from college and you're like, why should I waste my time with this book? Well, it's such a great conversation starter. Even just recently, I talked to my father-in-law. We were on like a video call thing, and he was sitting in front of a bookshelf, and I said, oh, what are you reading? And he listed off like 5 or 6 books, and then we just started talking for a long time about that. It's such a great way to forge relationships, to strengthen relationships, and succeeding in life is all about those relationships.
Agreed, Zach. By the way, that's why we emphasize physical reading, certainly at Lorehaven, but also give plenty of shout outs to audiobooks and digital. And by the way, our next sponsor has his book available in all 3 media, The Waymaker's Foresight by Dan Megill. But I want to give a special mention of that physical copy that he has available for this new science fiction adventure. Gavin and Nax are smugglers struggling to find work on a backwater space station. So when Lila, a highborn lady, hires them for a short jaunt to the nearest wormhole, they don't ask many questions. But Lila is fleeing the galaxy's mightiest empire, carrying knowledge of lost technologies that could reshape the stars. Now this unlikely trio must learn to work together as they race between star systems and unravel forgotten mysteries, while staying one step ahead of the Imperial fleets and a ruthless prince. The Waymaker's Foresight is a new science fiction adventure by Dan Megill, author of the acclaimed Earthburst trilogy, And this can be found on Amazon and Audible. To learn more, visit megill.com. That is MEGILL.com to discover the Waymaker's Foresight. You may want to get a physical copy. It may want to take up space. See what I did there? And that leads to chapter 2. Physical books really should take up space. So, Zach, I mentioned this a little earlier about simply the aesthetic, the feeling, that human connection with human history when you're holding a tangible copy of a book in your hands. So I want to make an argument from beauty and aesthetic as well as practical value there. But what is your argument for why we should get physical books, not just digital or audiobooks?
Yeah, I mean, it's better ROI is kind of my short summary here. And again, I want to kind of start off with, well, what's the objection to this? Why do people think it is a waste of space? You know, there's this whole trend nowadays to lower or reduce or erase your carbon footprint, which, by the way, you are the carbon they want to erase. But there's this idea of kind of leave no trace, be highly mobile, be ready to move at a moment's notice, whether that's for work, whether that's for ministry or missions, or it's just for personal reasons, wanting to be flexible, wanting to travel. So people that do any of these things might find that owning a very large physical collection of books very challenging now. We just learned this the hard way. We just moved my oldest daughter into college. I said, do you want to take some books with you? And so she started gathering some up, and then I grabbed an empty Amazon box or whatever and started filling it up. And very quickly, I'm like, oh, I can't use this big of a box. This will kill my back carrying this up the stairs. And so I went looking for smaller boxes, and I had to get more of them to be able to, fit all these books. And she didn't take that many. I think it was 1 or 2 shelves worth of books. But yeah, that's a challenging thing. I totally acknowledge that. And, and then we went into the library at her college. And very oddly, the entry floor, the first floor of this library is a computer lab and study lounge. And I think there was a small bookstore, but to actually get to the stacks of books, you got to go down to the basement. It's out of sight for some reason.
Does that really count as a library then if it's all screens?
Oh, I don't like this new trend.
It's a cyber cafe is what we used to call those.
Exactly. Yeah. And yes, it's true that digital books can go with you everywhere. You can put them in your pocket. I've got a Kindle, but I've also got the Kindle app on my phone. And then I even just learned of this device called the Palma from one of the guys here in our local writers group. It's basically an e-ink device. It's like a Kindle, but it's shaped like a phone. So it's very easy to keep in your pocket or a backpack or something. And you don't have to think about it. It hardly takes up any space. And that is very convenient to do that. So why wouldn't you just do this? Why wouldn't you just digitize everything, dematerialize everything? That's the other big trend of just turning everything digital. Well, counterintuitively, the digital social media channels like Instagram and TikTok have these trends called Bookstagram and BookTok. And just in general, people taking selfies. So on these dematerialized digital spaces, people are showing off pictures, not of their ebooks or their audiobooks, if you could even do that. They're showing off pictures of their physical books. They're taking close-up photos of their new hardbound book with like the cool design on the cover, or the splayed edges where it's like colorful on the edges, or the embossing on the inside under the flap. And there's something to be said for that beauty, for that tangible beauty that you can hold. It's not just a screenshot that you're sharing. I mean, how boring is that? But there's a bigger thing here, which is that when you hold a physical book, so first of all, you don't have to charge it. You don't have to get it on Wi-Fi. You don't have to worry about someone stealing it if you put it down at the Starbucks while you go to the bathroom. You don't have to worry about leaving it on a plane because you can just get it at the next airport bookstore. So first of all, it's very cost efficient, and it's very simple technology. But beyond all that, when you read a physical book, and yes, you might have to put your digital devices out of reach, you get fully immersed in that book. And as we read earlier from that neuroscientist, that when you immerse yourself in a story, which happens the most easily through a physical book, that is when you really level up your brain. That's when all of those skills start to be strengthened. And you also remember things more easily from a physical book. You can remember about third of the way through at the bottom of the page on the left, there was this really amazing moment, or there was this very salient point about how I should improve my life or something. And it's really hard to do that with an ebook. Now, the advantage of ebooks is you can highlight things, add notes, you can search. Okay, that's all well and good. But there's been a lot of studies that have shown physical books are actually much better for your long-term memory.
I'll take this back to the idea as well of Bibles versus electronic Bibles in church. I always bring a print Bible. Why? Well, not
Me too.
only am I then not being distracted by my phone or the idea of phone notifications. Ever get those phantom phone notifications?
Oh, I hate
those. It just means your brain has been leveled down. And Zach, I love that phrase, level up your brain. And I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up in a future podcast episode. A print Bible in church or for daily use levels up the brain, and it also levels up the spiritual health. Why? Well, I take it not to necessarily a survey or neuroscience, but to the very purpose for which God has made human beings, to be material creatures. He did not make us floating spiritoids. We are not destined for a life of floating spiritoids. The entity life of being a bodiless existence, that is not what we're destined for. God likes matter, as C.S. Lewis said. He invented it. And so because God likes matter, I think that at least gives the edge to a material, physical, tangible book taking up space with the scent of it and the feel of it and the weight of it. And by the way, just the idea of having those words on a page in physical space rather than bits and bytes on a screen. And then you turn the page and that page is gone and it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. You know it's there, but there is something about it being actually in space, on ink, on a page made from a dead tree, whether it's a Bible or some other book. I think that gives a physical book an advantage that an ebook or an audiobook doesn't have. Now, this isn't that episode, but those other media do have other advantages for sure. We can talk about those. But right now, I think it's worth it that physical books take up space. When my wife and I were going to buy our first house, a big part of that consideration is, will there be space for all of those books that we don't have space for now? Because we just had some foster kids move in and they were taking the rooms and they needed to because humans matter, but we'd packed up all the books and we felt the loss of that. And so when it was time to move to another house, we realized, no, there's going to be this amazing upstairs central room where we can put up all the shelves. We can get new shelves and put them up and make them look nice. And I knew, by the way, for a fact that when I had a dedicated space with books and decorations and that aesthetic, that would sink into my imagination and made me feel more like a book person. And I was pretty sure that if I did that, I'd be even selling some books eventually. And what do you know, it did end up working out that way. I don't think that would have worked if I'd been in a continued minimalist existence with all of my books in boxes or just on a screen. The physical copies do matter, and they're well worth the investment to take up space.
Yeah, now there's this whole other idea out there popularized by, I can't say the name, Nassim Nicholas Taleb in his book, The Black Swan, of an anti-library. And it's also talked about by Umberto Eco. And the idea is that by having a shelf or a library, a collection of books that you haven't read, and that you plan to read sometime in the future, but you haven't read them, but you own them, you paid for them. It does something else to your brain or to your character, which is it induces humility, because it's this tangible, constant reminder of, I don't know this thing yet.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that. And I do have books like that. Not whole shelves, but I do have books that induce humility. That's for sure.
Right. But just that idea of a book being a physical reminder of something. Now, it could also be a physical reminder of something you did read and you really enjoyed that story, or you really enjoyed that nonfiction book. I mean, we're mostly talking about fiction, but it can be such a great way to say, that book was so helpful to me my freshman year of college when I didn't really know what the gospel meant. And this explained it in a way I'd never understood before. Or this recent book about these characters that went on an adventure and what they discovered and how they were able to reconcile with this or that in their life. All of those like little lessons that we learn from books, every time we see that book, we are reminded of those things. You're not going to get those reminders from a Kindle book unless you go to the Kindle and you just happen to see that book title in your, digital library or something. Reading a physical book also helps us to just focus on a single thing at a single time. Our brains are so wired now to multitask all the time. I mean, I even found it challenging to assemble the outline for this episode as I was reading that article from The Atlantic, because I kept thinking of other things that I wanted to research and read and, search for. And I'm like, how long does it take me to read an article now? Like, I can't even just read a 600-word article. And so reading a book, sitting down with it helps us reset that. You don't get that dopamine rush from turning pages, and you might go through dopamine withdrawal. And that's why I said earlier, keep your other devices out of reach. Just here in our study that we all kind of use in our family, I like to leave everything on my computer desk or in another room and just sit on the bed in here and read a book. And I notice that impulse every couple minutes. Oh, I better check this. Oh, I need to email someone. Oh, I need to whatever. And it's like you said, it's that phantom, vibrate feeling in your pocket. It's like that phantom notification in my brain of like, oh, there's a new notification. I better go check. And literally there isn't, I don't hear or see anything, but our brains are so caught up in this doom loop of always needing that stimulation. And that's not a good place to live. Is really harmful for us. And so reading a physical book helps get away from all that and sort of desaturate that crazy amount of information that's flooding us all of the time. There was this amazing tweet the other day, if you still call it a tweet, X post, I don't like saying that. This comment from someone, he said, well, can't wait to start my day off with the infinite flood of doom information from all over the world. It's like, yeah, why do we do that? Why do we start off our day on phones? Why don't we start off our day in books? That's just crazy.
Well, you really should start your day off with your Bible reading if you can, audio or digital or physical. Got to be the scripture first thing in the morning, if possible. Another reminder why physical books matter is that they are a memorial. One of my favorite little habits that the Israelites were always doing in the Old Testament was, and often at the direct command of God or a prophet speaking for God, they would set up memorial stones. They'd say, okay, we fought a big battle here. We crossed the Jordan here. Let's get a bunch of rocks together and put them up. And then your children's children will look to you and say, hey, why is that there? And then you can tell them, because our great God did this for us on this day. It's a memorial. Physical books are a memorial. Shelves, a culture of reading, making it real, taking up space. This is actually for the purpose of discipleship. It's part of discipleship. Zach, I know we've had people in the house who just benefit from knowing that there are people, adults, who read a lot. And physical books help them to know that we prioritize reading. And that's the same thing with families in particular, when we are trying to teach kids to value books and value a lifestyle of reading and not just scrolling. Doesn't do very well if the only place that we read books is a device that scrolls. A physical book and a collection of books in a bookshelf, taking up space, can help them do that. Speaking of parental discipleship, sponsor 3 is once again The Pop Culture Parent. This is actually my first book. Before we're engaging the future world of the next century, we got to engage the challenges of the world of today. And I co-wrote this book along with Ted Turnow and Dr. Jared Moore, released from New Growth Press. This is a practical, fun discipleship manual for helping parents and anybody who's responsible for kids or themselves understand the purpose of stories and songs in popular culture and how in God's world, for the sake of our neighbors and for the sake of his church, we are to engage these stories. We go through 5 basic principles about evaluating each of these stories and songs, games, whatever, at different levels of development for the kids, or whether they are really young kids or middle graders or teens and young adults. I mean, we are engaging these stories in different ways as we grow up, and that's what we demonstrate in this book. One of my favorite aspects of this book, too, is we get to explore why we even have all these stories and songs. What is the point of them in God's world? Definitionally, what are they for? And we answer this question not just from feelings, but from scripture. And so it helps us, I think, value popular culture, including books, more, but also helps us discern them and be able to disentangle the good stuff in them from the idols that are in them and always make it about Jesus Christ. That is the mission of the Pop Culture Parent, subtitle Helping Kids Engage Their World for Christ. And you can find those links in the show notes for this episode 277. Amazon may still have the digital edition on super sale right now, but obviously we want you to get a physical copy due to the topic of this episode. Chapter 3, we've already talked about the money investment and the space investment. Now for the time investment. Yes, Virginia, physical books are well worth your time. Not just audio, not just digital, but sitting down, not mowing the lawn at the same time as the audiobook or checking your notifications while reading the digital book. A physical book without sound or notifications. Zach, how have you appreciated the investment of time with the physical books in your life?
All right, so I'm going to first talk about this by way of analogy. So right now, my daughter is starting college, and she has this whole welcome week. And one of those is, here's our traditions that we do at football games. Here's our hand symbols. Here's our, cheers that we do. Here's all the different things that happen throughout the game. And, get prepared for that. I mean, this is Texas, and so football is a big thing. And she's actually never gone to a football game in person because she went to a school that didn't have a football team in high school. And so this is a totally new experience for her. All right. So she's going to, starting next week or the week after that, she's going to go in person 3 or 4 hours live, watching a game with her friends, doing all the cheers, getting hot and sweaty and tired and hungry and all those things, and having all the drama, of course, of we're winning, we're losing, just to get it back again. And how does that compare to watching a video recording of that same game where you're sitting alone in front of the TV and on the couch and you're skipping through all the boring parts and the, in between all the football plays, you're skipping the commercials, you're skipping all the timeouts, and you're only seeing the action. Wouldn't you think that's more exciting, Stephen, to just see the action of the game and get rid of everything else and just be comfortable? Well, no. Anyone who's ever done that knows that that is not the same experience. And it might still be a little fun to see, oh, okay, my team won, or this is where they lost it, or this is where they got it back again. But there is just simply no equating those two experiences of a football game. And it's the same way with books, is that yes, it takes so much more time and space and money to sit down with a physical book, and you've got to make a lot of sacrifices. You got to turn off social media. You've got to not play video games. You've got to not do a bunch of things. And, you could do it so much quicker and easier with an AI summary. But are you really going to experience that story? Are you really going to learn from that book? The time that it takes is a cost. Sure, it's a sacrifice because you can never get that time back. I mean, that's probably the biggest objection that we have internally to reading a book. Hey, if I spend that 10 or 20 hours doing this instead of whatever else, I'll never get that back. Whether or not it was a good book. Even if it was a good book, that's 20 hours I could have done something else with. So you start adding up, I could have worked for those 20 hours and got this much money from it. I can sympathize with that because, as I mentioned earlier, I certainly didn't read all the books assigned to me when I was in high school or even college. I've been in book clubs where I just didn't finish the book, and I've said I was going to read a book and I just never did, because we're always doing that calculation. Is this going to be worth my time? Because I will never get that back. So here's the antidote to it. Besides what I said about the football analogy and the experience of that, do you ever berate yourself for spending time remembering the past or imagining the future? And I don't mean in necessarily the disordered ways of like depression or anxiety where we can, dwell unhealthily on the past or the future, but just remembering good things in the past, or plotting out a course of action in the future, or just trying to understand someone in the present and really ruminating on, okay, what is going on in this situation, in this relationship with this person? You're imagining these things. You're using time to do that. We don't imagine things instantly. We have to spend time internally doing those things. So again, with books, with fiction, it is an imagination exercise routine, because we don't live in the world of the Matrix where you can just download kung fu to your brain or whatever else it is you want to know or learn or experience. You can't just download a vacation to Rome or something, or a skiing expedition, or a hunting trip. You can't just, snap your fingers and all of a sudden you've had that experience. Everything we do in life requires time. But the thing that we actually spend our time the most on is our imagination. We're always thinking, what's going to happen next? What do I do? And we're looking back on the past saying, what has happened to get me to here? And how did all these blocks stack together? How did all these links in the chain come together? And we're always trying to figure these things out. And that's all that a book is. It's that imagination exercise.
Zach, I think another way to phrase the question that leads this closing chapter is that Sabbath rest is well worth your time. And every time I think about this is a great relief to me and a challenge to me and a conviction to me all at once, because there's this lie for particular kinds of personalities in the back of our heads that says, well, if we take that time to rest, that's time we're not going to get back. By the way, the same fake reasoning also applies to good habits like working out and, of course, reading and other restful activities like time with friends, time with family and such. Well, that's time I'm never going to get back. And I understand thinking that way if you're in a stressful circumstance or you have some job challenges and such. But ultimately, I think that is time that you're going to get back, because I can say from experience that taking that rest time to read, recharge, work out, good habits like that, you do end up working better. So even by your own flawed reasoning, it actually backfires. And actually it does kind of sharpen the imagination, sharpens the brain, makes you feel well rested. You're going to be more productive. Yes, you will get that time back. But even if you don't, do we really want to live life by such a mechanical, materialistic exchange of time, treating time as money? Do we really want to approach life like Ebenezer Scrooge? No, I don't think so. We have time for getting married to the loves of our lives. We have time for families. Those are things to which God has called us. And it literally does go back to that command modeled by God himself at the very dawn of creation, where he declares the seventh day set apart, somehow holy, a time for rest. And then God himself does that, and then not incidentally models our whole work week. So maybe you don't have time to read physical books Monday through Saturday. Okay, I get it. Well, Sunday is there, and you're literally not supposed to work on Sunday. We're not legalistic about it. It is a way that God blesses us. And although reading a book can challenge our imaginations and all that, it is a recreational activity. So going further about that would take us into another episode, but books are rest, and a physical book even more so. And so it's not just about getting our time back or becoming a better person or discipleship or any of that, or even about a really cool book collection. It is literally about one way to follow that commandment that God has given us, to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, and then also get that Sabbath rest whenever you can, not just for your sake, but for his sake, out of a desire to glorify him.
Well, to you, our listener, we know that you are a reader, and that's why you listen to this podcast. And one of the biggest reasons to read a book and why it's worth your money, your space, and your time is because there was a human author that invested their money and their writing space and their time to bring you that book. And that is worth so much more, by the way, than the little amount of time someone invested on a social media post, which is something that I'm always reminding myself is that, hey, I can trust a book as a worthy investment of my time and my money and my space because someone invested a lot into that. So, dear listener, we want to see one of your shelfies. Will you send us a picture of your physical book collection? Now, normally we ask a question, but this time we're just asking for an image. You don't have to say a word. Just show us a picture of your bookshelf. We'd love to see what's on your shelf. Send that to podcast@lorehaven.com, or if you feel comfortable sharing that on social media, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and X, or as we always say, we have a Discord server, the Lorehaven Guild, and there will be a thread for this episode 277. Share your picture there.
By the way, we got a remark on the lorehaven.com episode page for our last one, 276. That is from the Adaptation Station Master commenting on our episode, How Do Parents Find Books That Aren't Just Not Woke, But Actually Good? This person says, quote, real rainbows in nature have lovely, soft, delicate colors The rainbow flag looks tacky by comparison, end quote. That's a really great point, is that there is beauty to be found in great stories, starting with the Word of God. And then those human knockoffs just look kind of tacky. And right now, a lot of cultural conversation is happening about a certain restaurant chain in the United States that has made their logo minimalist, but also tacky. And it is tapping into a lot of people's memories about this place, but also their desires for good nostalgia, good traditions, as opposed to corporate tropes. We want your thoughts about that as well if you want to send them. And of course, you can always comment on the episode page at lorehaven.com. Next on Fantastical Truth, here in the United States, next week, we're going to have a holiday called Labor Day, which is meant to mark the actions of hard-working Americans. And right now, many Christian families are honoring the work of two Christian heroes in particular who are now at rest, such as a pastor named John MacArthur and the founder of Focus on the Family, Dr. James Dobson. Many fantastical stories wouldn't be here without leaders like this. Yes, even John MacArthur. When they pass on and people discuss and debate these heroes' ministries, how can we best honor their labors? We want to honor what's honorable, even with the flaws, and that includes good Christian leaders, very popular, famous ones, and that includes Christian authors, but also any book that has been made for the purpose, not necessarily of glorifying Jesus Christ, but for honoring and reflecting the good things he's put in the world. That's the main reason we want to celebrate books, physical copies, as well as the other stuff. They are a great investment of time, space, and money as we continue to seek and find Christ's fantastical truth.